Hello everyone, and welcome to today's presentation, Deep Dives into TopBraid EVN, Managing Changes. I would like to start by introducing you to today's speakers. We have Irene Polikoff. Irene is the CEO and co-founder at Top Quadrant. We also have Eric Fries. Eric is the Senior Semantic Solutions Architect at Top Quadrant, who also happens to be a previous customer with a large organization where he happened to implement EVN to support management of online materials as well as a product knowledge base. As part of today's webinar, we will give an overview and tour of the capabilities in TopBraid EVN 5.2 for safely managing changes to controlled vocabularies, including taxonomies, ontologies, glossaries, and more. A few logistical items before we get started today. Please feel free to ask questions as we go along by using your GoToWebinar controls. To post questions, please look on the right-hand side control panel. You should see a drop-down box for questions. If you click on the box, you should be able to post your question at any time during the presentation. We will address as many questions as time allows at the conclusion of the webinar. We'll also be recording today's webinar and we'll send a link to the recorded version. At this point, I'll pass it over to Eric. Eric?
Thank you, Christy. Let's dive right into today's program. I want to talk about managing changes using EVN. I'm going to talk at a pretty high level today about what EVN can do for you and where it fits into your vocabulary management strategy. And then Irene will show you how EVN's change management works and how it works in action. So at the end, we'll have time for some questions and answers. Top Quadrant is an enterprise information management company. We were founded in 2001, so we're celebrating our 15th anniversary. And we have a strong commitment to standards-based approaches, to some data semantics. We build practical innovation solutions, helping organizations manage complexity effectively. Really, our mission is to make enterprise information meaningful and useful. So, in my previous role, when we were considering a vocabulary management solution, there were several questions we considered, including some of these. So, what is the versioning strategy for the vocabularies and the vocabulary items that we were going to need to manage? And what did the workflow for change look like? How quickly did we need to roll out changes, or how were they going to be identified? What kind of audit capabilities, because we needed to see what changed when and who made those changes so that we could audit changes throughout the history of, or the life cycle of a vocabulary. And then who needed to be involved in making changes, who needed to be involved in approving changes, how did the right people get notified if changes were being requested, and then how would you track changes, and if you needed to, how would you revert them? So if you're familiar with EVN as a taxonomy manager, you'll notice that many of the features that we're going to see today are something you might already use. But as far as change management, the things we want to highlight are audit trails, so being able to view changes, revert changes, and we also have a change reporting capability. We have the ability to work within working copies, and Irene will talk more about this, but working copies are really sandboxes where you can work separately from a production vocabulary, make your changes, set up an approval workflow, and then when everything is done, then you can promote those changes to production. You can use RACI and notifications, and for those who aren't familiar with RACI, RACI stands for responsible, accountable, consulted, and informed. And so you can assign specific users who are responsible or who are the recommender of a change, those who are accountable or the approver of the change, those who are consulted, so your subject matter experts, for example, and then anyone else who might need to be informed of a change. There's reporting mechanisms built in, so there's a comparison reports as well as constraint violations, so you can set up rules to make sure data quality standards are met. You can clone an entire vocabulary if you need to create a new version, and if you need to, you can also publish to EVN Explorer, which gives you anonymous login with review capabilities as well as commenting capabilities. Now, before we start the demo, I want to give you just a quick intro to EVN if you're not familiar with it. It's a web-based solution, so that means there's no software that you need to install. It just works in a modern browser, so people just log in. And it's designed really to meet the needs of an organization that are doing vocabulary management. It supports search. It supports tracking of content. It integrates with databases and other applications that leverage metadata, and really works well within the entire enterprise data management environment. It includes most everything that you would expect to see in a taxonomy manager, but it makes it easier for multi-user teams because of its web-based nature. It allows them to create and manage distributed networks of vocabularies with different members of the team having different roles or different levels of access, so that the right people are touching the right bits of data at the right time. So now I'm going to turn it over to Irene to highlight some of EVN's change management capabilities. Irene?
Yes, thank you, Eric. Let me share my screen, and we'll get started with the demo. First, a little orientation for those of you who are new to TopBraid EVN. You have navigation on the left-hand side that allows you to switch between different categories of vocabularies that EVN manages. Your taxonomies are your typical hierarchy kind of models. Ontologies may not necessarily have hierarchical data and may, for example, be simply about the structure of the information, kind of a logical model of a sort, or may also contain flat lists of information. Content tag sets is something that is generated by our auto-classifier module when documents get associated with terms from either taxonomies or ontologies, and crosswalks are maps across different vocabularies. Here you also have some common capabilities that shared across. For example, you could search across all vocabularies, you could see tasks across all vocabularies, and we will talk and I will demo creation of a task in a moment. You could have a list of software systems, and the management of software systems is important in the context of usage, because we allow you to record what applications may be using particular vocabularies. And organizations is something that gets used in the context of notifications and races, as Eric has touched on. So with that, let's start with our demo and make some changes. We're going to be working with taxonomy, and in particular here you see available taxonomies that are already managed by EVN. So we're going to work with this one, Geo. It has a standard kind of a view of different geographical regions, countries, down to cities and so on. And TopBraid EVN is truly model-based and very flexible, so depending on the type of the concept you are working with, you may have different fields available to you and different kind of information that you see. So here we're looking at the continent, which is Europe, and there's not that much information here, but we see a lot of multilingual labels. Let's take a look at the country, and for country we see some more country-specific information like capital, language, and so on. And let's make some changes here. So unlike Europe, we are actually somewhat short on the multilingual labels, so let me add a French label, just so that you see the example of how the audit trail looks like. And we could specify that it's French. By the way, here you see all the additional fields that are available to you, and those could be customized. And so we could experience another another source of a change. Let's delete longitude and save those changes. So now if I wanted to see the history of changes, I could click here, and the additions are shown in green, and the deletions are shown in this peak reddish color. They could be reverted. You could see who has made those changes and when. And this audit trail is kept on, and there is also a report. You could see this in the context of the concept that you're focusing on, but then there is also a report where you could see the changes for the entire vocabulary, and you could search over them and filter and so on. Now, when we make changes, sometimes maybe it's appropriate to make a quick change like this directly in your quote-unquote live vocabulary that may be accessed by systems in real time or getting ported to different systems. But quite often our customers want to have a more controlled process of managing changes, where changes could be reviewed and before they get put into this gold production copy. And also often it's not about a single change, but it may be about a group of changes that would go together. So with that, I just switched at something we're calling a home page or a management screen for this vocabulary. And you'll see that there is a number of activities represented by the tabs that go across that are available to me. So one of them is working copies. Working copies, as Eric mentioned, are virtual sandboxes. I could create a working copy for, let's say, and give it a name and a description. So I could say labels, and say that this is about completing all the national labels for concepts. And with that, I'm going to create a working copy. So instead of doing my additional labels directly in a production copy, I could now go into this working copy and do edits there. So let me continue with my edits and go to, I was working with Albania, so I could look it up here. And just for the purposes of this demo, let me add a Spanish label for Albania, which actually looks exactly like the English one. All right. And I'm going to save this change. So now, if we were to go back into our production copy and take a look at that and go to Albania. So you'll see that the Spanish label doesn't exist here. It's not affected until we go through our process of making changes in this sandbox. That is a working copy. Review it, approve it, and then we commit it to production. So with that, let me switch back to my working copy and I don't know that I'm going to want to make additional edits to it, but I probably want to show you a feature that has to do with tasks. So by the way, you could see the whole history here as well. So you'll see that there was a Spanish label down here. Now, let me, quite often when people work collaboratively, they want to do they want to communicate with each other. And they could communicate with each other by either making comments, review comments, or any kind of other comments, questions, or they could also create tasks. And the main difference between comments and tasks, besides the different semantics, is that with tasks you could assign them. Both comments and tasks could have statuses, but tasks could also have due dates. So here I've noticed that the longitude is not there. So let me create a task, and I don't have many users here, so I'm assigning it to myself, administrator, and say to update. Okay, and I captured it here. So once a concept has a task or comment associated with it, you could see a counter incrementing, and you'll be able to see this right next to the concept. When you look at it, you could comment on the task, you could change status and add more information, and do all kind of things that you typically would do with a task as you resolve it. There is also a task report where you could see all tasks across a vocabulary, and even all tasks that may be assigned to you across all vocabularies. When the task is created, notification email is sent to assignee. You could also do some notification settings that allow you to decide that notifications should be sent to other people, like, for example, a person that manages a vocabulary. Okay, so with that, there are also a number of handy reports for working copies. For example, you could do spell checking, you could see if any data is incomplete, so some required fields don't have values. You could compare it with a production copy by running a comparison report, and here we see that the only difference is this one label that we have changed. You could also, if you have multiple working copies and running in parallel, you could do comparison and see if any of the concepts you're changing are affected by another working copy that's going on. And when you are ready with your changes, what you could do, you could freeze for review. And when the working copy is frozen for review, you could no longer edit it. You now will be able only to view it. But you could also make comments and create tasks, because all of it is part of the review process. Then when the review is completed, you could either commit it to production or reject it and then unfreeze it to allow further changes. In terms of committing to production, you have a few options. You could, for example, and here I've switched, and now I'm looking at the change history report, and of course I only have one change, so there's not much to filter on. But the reason I went here is I wanted to show you that you could actually, if you wanted to, commit individual changes as opposed to the entire working copy. This allows you the ability to cherry pick your changes and maybe have a running working copy where you incrementally commit from, as an alternative to creating working copies per project. All right. Now, so let's say you're happy with these changes, and the next step, provided that you have the right level of permissions, is that you could commit all your changes to production, which is what I'm going to do now. And now when I switch to the geo vocabulary and edit that, we should see our Spanish label for Albania. And sure, it is here. So that kind of completes the cycle of and the process of making changes. Now, one more thing that I wanted to talk about is notification feature. And in this home page or management screen, there's a number of different actions that you could perform. One of those is configure notifications. When you set up a server, you could say whether you want to have task emails sent to assignees. So that's one level of settings at the administration level. You could also set up different default notifications for every vocabulary. And then you could change this at the individual vocabulary. So for example, do you want someone to be notified when the working copy is created? Do you want someone to be notified when vocabulary status has been changed, and so on? And there could be other custom notification types of events. So that's to follow up on notifications. Now, another question that we often get from customers is, well, what about if I have to have multiple versions of the vocabulary at the same time in production? So let's say some of my systems use release 1, and others need to use the release 2, which is changed, but I'm not ready to upgrade all the systems to that. So that's another type of change management, and we handle this through this create a cloned version capability. So if I wanted to, I could create a version 2 of the and that will have whatever's content in my version 1 at this point. Everything up to date. From then on, this become 2 separate vocabularies. So any changes to the version 1 will not be shown in version 2, and any changes to version 2 will not be shown in version 1. They sort of exist in parallel. This is different from the working copy, where the idea of the working copy is that it will then be committed to production. And finally, to complete our demo, another feature that users often ask for is the ability to review these changes outside of the editorial team in a broader community. And for that, we have a module called TopBraid Explorer, and you could publish any of your models to the Explorer. It essentially gives your users the same type of view as they have in the EVN, but they don't have edit capabilities. It's also somewhat simplified view for them. And there you not necessarily have named users. So you could publish to Explorer. There it could be browsed, searched over, viewed by the broader audience, and they could also comment, and comments go to the editorial team, but no changes are made. So with that, I think I've completed with my demo, and like to turn over to Eric to make a few points, additional points, and also take some questions. I see that we already have some questions. So
okay,
Eric,
thanks.
over to you.
Okay, thanks, Irene. I want to wrap up really quickly so we have time for the questions. One of the things I wanted to reiterate was that while Irene was showing the capabilities using a taxonomy, that they all work within all the different vocabulary types managed within EVN. So they work on ontologies and glossaries, text sets, and crosswalks. Now, some of the benefits of change management within EVN are listed here. So you can have modifications within working copies, and those are going to be managed separately from production until you go through final approval. And as Irene demonstrated, you could set or add them to production one at a time or as a batch. Individual concepts can be added, they can be deleted, they can be cloned, they can be merged, they can be replaced in these working copies. And if you need to, you can take an entire vocabulary and clone it, or you can take a branch or some sub-hierarchy of terms within the vocabulary and clone that to create either a new vocabulary or to expand an existing vocabulary. Again, there's auditability at all levels, so you see it at the concept change level. You can see tracking also as far as the history within the vocabulary. EVN provides a collaborative and secure environment, so if you need to have requests for change, you can set up Explorer to have people make requests for change, but that aren't actually touching the production vocabulary. You can have the people working on the vocabulary make those changes. You can have notifications sent out whenever changes are made and whenever approvals are required. And then access and permissions and notifications can be managed on a per user or a per role level within each different vocabulary. And then again, we have the environment for published vocabularies and wider comments, so that you can have a separate server set up for the greater world to be able to see your vocabulary and make comments to it and look at it without bogging down your editorial system. Irene mentioned that there's a possibility, or that EVN can be integrated in with other systems, and this slide just kind of shows the possibilities. So you can bring data in from different formats, you can export it out in different formats, you can have EVN talk with other systems, so a content management system or SharePoint or other custom applications. And so EVN fits well, again, within the entire realm of your data management environment. So now, while today we've kind of focused on change management, this slide shows kind of the broader view of EVN's key capabilities, and I'm not going to read through the whole slide, but there's more information about this and the other capabilities on our website. So that, I'm going to conclude our presentation portion and turn it back over to Christy to see what we have for questions.
Thank you, Eric, and thank you, Irene. That brings us to the part of our webinar where we take your questions. So if you haven't already, please submit your questions and discussion points in the question box located in the right-hand side control panel. So if you're ready, let's see what we have. Okay, our first question, I think this is for you, Eric. In your previous role, tell us more about how you used EVN to manage workflows around managing updates.
Okay. I guess the best way to explain it is that we had different flows that were set up based on different application groups. And so we had taxonomies that we were managing for the marketing group. We had taxonomies and ontologies that we were managing for the tech data group. And while there were some common terms between those, they really did live separately from each other. And so we were able to use EVN and the permission management and user management to keep those groups of employees from seeing everybody else's and cluttering up their screen. And then we also had an environment set up, and actually, being the good Boy Scout that I am, I have a slide. What we had set up was actually 3 servers. So we had a dev server, a development server, that the changes were made in, and that was kind of where the taxonomists would work, make changes, test things out and things like that. Once they got things to a stable point, they would publish that to a user and test environment. And that's where the SMEs, the customers, would have a chance to look at it, and based on what their role was, we would also in that environment publish out to a version of Explorer so that they could not only see the taxonomy or the changes in the capsule form, you could see the entire taxonomy in its full form as if the changes had been applied, so they could kind of see the big picture. And then once those were done, we would publish that out to the production environment, and that one also had an Explorer environment so that people within the company could log in and look at it. People outside of the company, so partners and people like that, could log into Explorer, and we published things to Explorer that had the ability to bring comments, and then when you made the comments, that went back to the dev server and back to the taxonomist and started the whole cycle over again. So again, so the way the slide shows is you have the production version. We worked in the working copies several times around until we got to the point where it was ready for review. If it was approved, then we would push that out to production. Otherwise, we would unfreeze it and then put it back into an editorial mode. And then the times where we were just testing something and it didn't quite turn out the way we thought, we still had the ability to archive that off the system so that if something came back, oh yeah, I tried that one time, we could still bring those back. And so that's kind of how we worked in that environment.
Oh, great, thank you, Eric. We'll have time for maybe one more question. Irene, maybe you can take this one. The question is, can EVN be integrated with the external workflow change management tools?
Yes, absolutely. In fact, Eric, maybe you could page back to the integration slide. I think, yeah, this slide. I think that's a good slide to use to answer this question. As you could see, EVN has much of integration capabilities and hook-ins. For example, it could integrate and interact with other products using web services. Pretty much everything that is available to you to do manually, imports, exports, reviewing, seeing change history or seeing constraint violations. Pretty much every action, edits, comments, is also available as a RESTful web service. So this makes it possible for EVN to nicely integrate with other systems. And such other system could be external workflow that sends events to EVN or listens to events produced by EVN. We also have customers that use Enterprise Service Bus, JMS type of integration, and EVN out of the box has integration with JMS. So that's a popular way to put messages into the bus and receive messages and integrate that way.
Great, thank you, Irene. I think that's all the time we have for today, and several of you have posted questions and if we will share the slide deck. We will be doing that. We'll provide a link to this recorded presentation as well as to the slides following today's webinar. We certainly hope you found today's information valuable, and thank you everyone for your attention and interest in today's webinar. I hope you have a great day.